Popular Fallacies by Charles Lamb. This axiom contains a principle of compensation, which disposes us to admit the truth of it. But there is no safe trusting to dictionaries and definitions. We should more willingly fall in with this popular language if we did not find brutality, sometimes awkwardly coupled with valor, in the same vocabulary. The comic writers, with their poetical justice, have contributed not a little to mislead us upon this point. To see a hectoring fellow exposed and beaten upon the stage has something in it wonderfully diverting. Some people's share of animal spirits is notoriously low and defective. It has not strength to raise a vapor or furnish out the wind of a tolerable bluster. These love to be told that huffing is no part of valor. The truest courage with them is that which is the least noisy and obtrusive. But confront one of these silent heroes with the swagger of real life, and his confidence in the theory quickly vanishes. Pretensions do not uniformly bespeak non-performance. A modest, inoffensive deportment does not necessarily imply valor, neither does the absence of it justify us in denying that quality. Hickman wanted modesty. We do not mean him of Clarissa, but whoever doubted his courage. Even the poets, upon whom this equitable distribution of qualities should be most binding, have thought it agreeable to nature to depart from the rule upon occasion. Harapher in the Agonists is indeed a bully upon the received notions. Milton has made him at once a blusterer, a giant, and a dastard. But Almanzor in Dryden talks of driving armies singly before him, and does it. Tom Brown had a shrewder insight into this kind of character than either of his predecessors. He divides the palm more equably, and allows his hero a sort of demediate preeminence. Bully Dawson kicked by half the town, and half the town kicked by Bully Dawson. This was true distributive justice. The weakest part of mankind have this saying commonest in their mouth. It is the trite consolation administered to the easy dupe, when he has been tricked out of his money or estate, that the acquisition of it will do the owner no good. But the rogues of this world, the prudenter part of them at least, know better, and if the observation had been as true as it is old, would not have failed by this time to have discovered it. They have pretty sharp distinctions of the fluctuating and the permanent. Lightly come, lightly go, is a proverb which they can very well afford to leave. When they leave little else to the losers, they do not always find manners, got by rapine or chicanery, insensibly to melt away, as the poets will have it, or that all gold glides like thawing snow from the thief's hand that grasps it. Church land, alienated to lay uses, was formerly denounced to have this slippery quality, but some portions of it somehow always stuck so fast that the denunciators have been vain to postpone the prophecy of refundment to a late posterity. The severest exaction surely ever invented upon the self-denial of poor human nature. This is to expect a gentleman to give a treat without partaking of it, to sit esurient at his own table, and commend the flavour of his venison upon the absurd strength of his never touching it himself. On the contrary, we love to see a wag taste his own joke to his party, to watch a quirk, or a merry conceit, flickering upon the lips some seconds before the tongue is delivered of it. If it be good, fresh, and racy, begotten of the occasion, if he that utters it never thought it before, he is naturally the first to be tickled with it. And any suppression of such complacence we hold to be churlish and insulting. What does it seem to imply, but that your company is weak or foolish enough to be moved by an image or a fancy, that shall stir you not at all, or but faintly? This is exactly the humour of the fine gentleman in Mandeville, who, while he dazzles his guests with the display of some costly toy, affects himself to see nothing considerable in it. A speech from the poorer sort of people, which always indicates that the party vituperated is a gentleman. The very fact which they deny is that which galls and exasperates them to use this language. The forbearance with which it is usually received is a proof what interpretation the bystander sets upon it. Of akin to this, and still less politic, are the phrases with which, in their street rhetoric, they ply one another more grossly. He is a poor creature. He has not a rag to cover and see, though this last, we confess, is more frequently applied by females to females. They do not perceive that the satire glances upon themselves. A poor man, of all things in the world, should not upbraid an antagonist with poverty. Are there no other topics, as to tell him his father was hanged, his sister, and see, without exposing a secret, which should be kept snug between them, and doing an affront to the order to which they have the honour equally to belong, all this while they do not see how the wealthier man stands by and laughs in his sleeve at both. A smooth text to the latter, and preached from the pulpit, is sure of a docile audience from the pews lined with satin. It is twice sitting upon velvet to a foolish squire to be told that he, and not perverse nature as the homilies would make us imagine, is the true cause of all the irregularities in his parish. This is striking at the root of free will indeed, and denying the originality of sin in any sense. But men are not such implicit sheep as this comes to. If the abstinence from evil on the part of the upper classes is to derive itself from no higher principle than the apprehension of setting ill patterns to the lower, we beg leave to discharge them from all squeamishness on that score. They may even take their fill of pleasures, where they can find them. The genius of poverty, hampered and straitened as it is not so barren of invention, but it can trade upon the staple of its own vice without drawing upon their capital. The poor are not quite such servile imitators as they take them for. Some of them are very clever artists in their way. Here and there we find an original, who taught the poor to steal, to pilfer. They did not go to the great for schoolmasters in these faculties surely. It is well if in some vices they allow us to be no copyists. In no other sense is it true that the poor copy them, than as servants may be said to take after their masters and mistresses, when they succeed to their reversionary cold meats. If the master, from indisposition or some other cause, neglect his food, the servant dines notwithstanding. Oh, but, some will say, the force of example is great. We knew a lady who was so scrupulous on this head, that she would put up with the calls of the most impertinent visitor, rather than let her servant say she was not at home, for fear of teaching her maid to tell an untruth. And this in the very face of the fact, which she knew well enough, that the wench was one of the greatest liars upon the earth without teaching. So much so, that her mistress possibly never heard 2 words of consecutive truth from her in her life. But nature must go for nothing, example must be everything. This liar ingrained, who never opened her mouth without a lie, must be guarded against a remote inference which she, pretty casuist, might possibly draw from a form of words, literally false but essentially deceiving no one, that under some circumstances a fib might not be so exceedingly sinful. A fiction, too, not at all in her own way, or one that she could be suspected of adopting, for few servant-wenches care to be denied to visitors. This word example reminds us of another fine word which is in use upon these occasions, encouragement. People in our sphere must not be thought to give encouragement to such proceedings. To such a frantic height is this principle capable of being carried, that we have known individuals who have thought it within the scope of their influence to sanction despair, and give eclat to suicide. A domestic in the family of a county member lately deceased, for love or some unknown cause, cut his throat, but not successfully. The poor fellow was otherwise much loved and respected, and great interest was used in his behalf upon his recovery, that he might be permitted to retain his place, his word being first pledged, not without some substantial sponsors to promise for him, then the like should never happen again. His master was inclinable to keep him, but his mistress thought otherwise, and John in the end was dismissed, her ladyship declaring that she could not think of encouraging any such doings in the county. Not a man, woman, or child in 10 miles round Guildhall, who really believes this saying. The inventor of it did not believe it himself. It was made in revenge by somebody who was disappointed of a regale. It is a vile cold scrag of mutton sophism, a lie palmed upon the palate which knows better things. If nothing else could be said for a feast, this is sufficient, that from the superflux there is usually something left for the next day. Morally interpreted, it belongs to a class of proverbs which have a tendency to make us undervalue money. Of this cast are those notable observations, that money is not health, riches cannot purchase everything, the metaphor which makes gold to be mere muck, with the morality which traces fine clothing to the sheep's back, and denounces pearl as the unhandsome excretion of an oyster. Hence, too, the phrase which imputes dirt to acres, a sophistry so barefaced, that even the literal sense of it is true only in a wet season. This, and abundance of similar sage saws assuming to inculcate content, we verily believe to have been the invention of some cunning borrower, who had designs upon the purse of his wealthier neighbour, which he could only hope to carry by force of these verbal jugglings. Translate any one of these sayings out of the artful metonyme which envelops it, and the trick is apparent. Goodly legs and shoulders of mutton, exhilarating cordials, books, pictures, the opportunities of seeing foreign countries, independence, heart's ease, a man's own time to himself, are not muck. However we may be pleased to scandalize with that appellation the faithful metal that provides them for us, our experience would lead us to quite an opposite conclusion. Temper, indeed, is no test of truth, but warmth and earnestness are a proof at least of a man's own conviction of the rectitude of that which he maintains. Coolness is as often the result of an unprincipled indifference to truth or falsehood, as of a sober confidence in a man's own side in a dispute. Nothing is more insulting sometimes than the appearance of this philosophically temper. There is little Titubus, the stammering law stationer in Lincoln's Inn, We have seldom known this shrewd little fellow engaged in an argument where we were not convinced he had the best of it, if his tongue would but fairly have seconded him, when he has been spluttering excellent broken sense for an hour together, writhing and labouring to be delivered of the point of dispute, the very gist of the controversy knocking at his teeth, which like some obstinate iron grating still obstructed its deliverance, his puny frame convulsed, and face reddening all over at an unfairness in the logic which he wanted articulation to expose. It has moved our gall to see a smooth, portly fellow of an adversary, that cared not a button for the merits of the question, by merely laying his hand upon the head of the stationer, and desiring him to be calm. Your tall disputants have always the advantage, with a provoking sneer carry the argument clean from him in the opinion of all the bystanders, who have gone away clearly convinced that Titubus must have been in the wrong, because he was in a passion, and that Mr., meaning his opponent, is one of the fairest, and at the same time one of the most dispassionate arguers breathing. The same might be said of the wittiest local allusions. A custom is sometimes as difficult to explain to a foreigner as a pun. What would become of a great part of the wit of the last age if it were tried by this test? How would certain topics, as aldermanity, cuckoldry, have sounded to a Terentian auditory, though Terence himself had been alive to translate them? Senator Urbanus, with curruca to boot for a synonym, would but faintly have done the business. Words involving notions are hard enough to render. It is too much to expect us to translate a sound, and give an elegant version to a jingle. The Virgilian harmony is not translatable, but by substituting harmonious sounds in another language for it. To Latinize a pun, we must seek a pun in Latin that will answer to it. As to give an idea of the double endings in Hudibras, we must have recourse to a similar practice in the old monkish doggerel. Dennis, the fiercest oppuner of puns in ancient or modern times, professes himself highly tickled with the rustic chiming to ecclesiastic. Yet what is this but a species of pun, a verbal consonance? If by worst be only meant the most far-fetched and startling, we agree to it. A pun is not bound by the laws which limit nicer wit. It is a pistol let off at the ear, not a feather to tickle the intellect. It is an antic which does not stand upon manners, but comes bounding into the presence, and does not show the less comic for being dragged in sometimes by the head and shoulders. What though it limp a little, or prove defective in one leg, all the better. A pun may easily be too curious and artificial. Who has not at one time or other been at a party of professors, himself perhaps an old offender in that line, where, after ringing a round of the most ingenious conceits, every man contributing his shot, and some there the most expert shooters of the day, after making a poor word run the gauntlet till it is ready to drop, after hunting and winding it through all the possible ambages of similar sounds, after squeezing and hauling and tugging at it till the very milk of it will not yield a drop further, suddenly some obscure, unthought-of fellow in a corner, who was never apprenticed to the trade, whom the company for very pity passed over, as we do by a known poor man when a money subscription is going round, no one calling upon him for his quota, has all at once come out with something so whimsical yet so pertinent, so brazen in its pretensions yet so impossible to be denied, so exquisitely good and so deplorably bad at the same time, that it has proved a Robin Hood's shot. Anything ulterior to that is despaired of, and the party breaks up, unanimously voting it to be the very worst, that is, best, pun of the evening. This species of wit is the better for not being perfect in all its parts. What it gains in completeness, it loses in naturalness. The more exactly it satisfies the critical, the less hold it has upon some other faculties. The puns which are most entertaining are those which will least bear an analysis. Of this kind is the following, recorded with a sort of stigma, in one of Swift's Miscellanies. An Oxford scholar, meeting a porter who was carrying a hare through the streets, accosts him with this extraordinary question: "Prithee, friend, is that thy own hair or a wig?" There is no excusing this, and no resisting it. A man might blur 10 sides of paper in attempting a defence of it against a critic, who should be laughter-proof. The quibble in itself is not considerable. It is only a new turn given, by a little false pronunciation, to a very common, though not very courteous inquiry. Put by one gentleman to another at a dinner party, it would have been vapid. To the mistress of the house, it would have shown much less wit than rudeness. We must take in the totality of time, place, and person. The pert look of the inquiring scholar, the desponding looks of the puzzled porter, the one stopping at leisure, the other hurrying on with his burthen, the innocent though rather abrupt tendency of the first member of the question, with the utter and inextricable irrelevancy of the second. The place, a public street not favourable to frivolous investigations, the affrontive quality of the primitive inquiry, the common question invidiously transferred to the derivative, the new turn given to it in the implied satire, namely, that few of that tribe are expected to eat of the good things which they carry, they being in most countries considered rather as the temporary trustees than owners of such dainties, which the fellow was beginning to understand. But then the wig again comes in, and he can make nothing of it. All put together constitute a picture. Hogarth could have made it intelligible on canvas. Yet 9 out of 10 critics will pronounce this a very bad pun, because of the defectiveness in the concluding member, which is its very beauty, and constitutes the surprise. The same persons shall cry up for admirable the cold quibble from Virgil about the broken Cremona, one because it is made out in all its parts, and leaves nothing to the imagination. We venture to call it cold, because of thousands who have admired it, it would be difficult to find one who has heartily chuckled at it. As appealing to the judgment merely, setting the risible faculty aside, we must pronounce it a monument of curious felicity. But as some stories are said to be too good to be true, it may with equal truth be asserted of this biverbal allusion that it is too good to be natural. One cannot help suspecting that the incident was invented to fit the line. It would have been better had it been less perfect. Like some Virgilian hemistichs, it has suffered by filling up. The nimium vicina was enough in conscience, the cremen afterwards loads it. It is in fact a double pun, and we have always observed that a superfetation in this sort of wit is dangerous. When a man has said a good thing, it is seldom politic to follow it up. We do not care to be cheated a second time, or perhaps the mind of man, with reverence be it spoken, is not capacious enough to lodge 2 puns at a time. The impression, to be forcible, must be simultaneous and undivided. Footnote 1 Swift. Those who use this proverb can never have seen Mrs. Conradi. The soul, if we may believe Plotinus, is a ray from the celestial beauty. As she partakes more or less of this heavenly light, she informs, with corresponding characters, the fleshly tenement which she chooses, and frames to herself a suitable mansion. All which only proves that the soul of Mrs. Conradi, in her pre-existent state, was no great judge of architecture. To the same effect, in a hymn in honour of beauty, divine Spenser, platonizing, sings, "Every spirit as it is more pure, and hath in it the more of heavenly light, so it the fairer body doth procure to habit in, and it more fairly dight with cheerful grace and amiable sight. For of the soul the body form doth take, for soul is form and doth the body make." But Spenser, it is clear, never saw Mrs. Conradi. These poets, we find, are no safe guides in philosophy, for here in his very next stanza but one is a saving clause which throws us all out again, and leaves us as much to seek as ever. Yet oft it falls that many a gentle mind dwells in deformed tabernacle drowned, either by chance against the course of kind, or through unaptness in the substance found, which it assumed of some stubborn ground, that will not yield unto her form's direction, but is performed with some foul imperfection. From which it would follow that Spenser had seen somebody like Mrs. Conradi. The spirit of this good lady, her previous anima, must have stumbled upon one of these untoward tabernacles which he speaks of. A more rebellious commodity of clay for a ground, as the poet calls it, no gentle mind, and sure hers is one of the gentlest, ever had to deal with. Pondering upon her inexplicable visage, inexplicable we mean, but by this modification of the theory, we have come to a conclusion that, if one must be plain, it is better to be plain all over, than amidst a tolerable residue of features, to hang out one that shall be exceptionable. No one can say of Mrs. Conradi's countenance that it would be better if she had but a nose. It is impossible to pull her to pieces in this manner. We have seen the most malicious beauties of her own sex baffled in the attempt at a selection. The tout ensemble defies particularizing. It is too complete, too consistent, as we may say, to admit of these invidious reservations. It is not as if some apels had picked out here a lip, and there a chin, out of the collected ugliness of Greece, to frame a model by. It is a symmetrical whole. We challenge the minutest connoisseur to cavil at any part or parcel of the countenance in question, to say that this or that is improperly placed. We are convinced that true ugliness, no less than is affirmed of true beauty, is the result of harmony. Like that too it reigns without a competitor. No one ever saw Mrs. Conradi without pronouncing her to be the plainest woman that he ever met with in the course of his life. The first time that you are indulged with a sight of her face is an era in your existence ever after. You are glad to have seen it, like Stonehenge. No one can pretend to forget it. No one ever apologized to her for meeting her in the street on such a day and not knowing her. The pretext would be too bare. Nobody can mistake her for another. Nobody can say of her, "I think I have seen that face somewhere, but I cannot call to mind where." You must remember that in such a parlour it first struck you, like a bust. You wondered where the owner of the house had picked it up. You wondered more when it began to move its lips, so mildly too. No one ever thought of asking her to sit for her picture. Lockets are for remembrance, and it would be clearly superfluous to hang an image at your heart, which once seen can never be out of it. It is not a mean face either, its entire originality precludes that. Neither is it of that order of plain faces which improve upon acquaintance. Some very good but ordinary people, by an unwearied perseverance in good offices, put a cheat upon our eyes, juggle our senses out of their natural impressions, and set us upon discovering good indications in a countenance which at first sight promised nothing less. We detect gentleness which had escaped us lurking about an under lip. But when Mrs. Conradi has done you a service, her face remains the same. When she has done you 1,000, and you know that she is ready to double the number, still it is that individual face. Neither can you say of it that it would be a good face if it was not marked by the smallpox, a compliment which is always more admissive than excusatory, for either Mrs. Conradi never had the smallpox, or, as we say, took it kindly. No, it stands upon its own merits fairly. There it is. It is her mark, her token, that which she is known by. Nor a lady's age in the parish register. We hope we have more delicacy than to do either, but some faces spare us the trouble of these dental inquiries. And what if the beast, which my friend would force upon my acceptance, prove upon the face of it a sorry Rosinante, a lean, ill-favoured jade, whom no gentleman could think of setting up in his stables? Must I, rather than not be obliged to my friend, make her a companion to Eclipse or Lightfoot? A horse-giver, no more than a horse-seller, has a right to palm his spavined article upon us for good wear. An equivalent is expected in either case, and with my own good will I would no more be cheated out of my thanks than out of my money. Some people have a knack of putting upon you gifts of no real value, to engage you to substantial gratitude. We thank them for nothing. Our friend Mitis carries this humour of never refusing a present to the very point of absurdity, if it were possible to couple the ridiculous with so much mistaken delicacy and real good nature. Not an apartment in his fine house, and he has a true taste in household decorations, but is stuffed up with some preposterous print or mirror, the worst adapted to his panels that may be, the presence of his friends that know his weakness, while his noble Van Dykes are displaced, to make room for a set of daubs, the work of some wretched artist of his acquaintance, who, having had them returned upon his hands for bad likenesses, finds his account in bestowing them here gratis. The good creature has not the heart to mortify the painter at the expense of an honest refusal. It is pleasant, if it did not vex one at the same time, to see him sitting in his dining parlour, surrounded with obscure aunts and cousins to God knows whom, while the true Lady Marys and Lady Bettys of his own honourable family, in favour to these adopted frights, are consigned to the staircase and the lumber-room. In like manner his goodly shelves are one by one stripped of his favourite old authors, to give place to a collection of presentation copies, the flower and bran of modern poetry. A presentation copy, reader, if haply you are yet innocent of such favours, is a copy of a book which does not sell, sent you by the author with his foolish autograph at the beginning of it, for which, if a stranger, he only demands your friendship; if a brother author, he expects from you a book of yours which does sell in return. We can speak to experience, having by us a tolerable assortment of these gift horses. Not to ride a metaphor to death, we are willing to acknowledge that in some gifts there is sense. A duplicate out of a friend's library, where he has more than one copy of a rare author, is intelligible. There are favours short of the pecuniary, a thing not fit to be hinted at among gentlemen, which confer as much grace upon the acceptor as the offerer. The kind, we confess, which is most to our palate is of those little conciliatory missives, which for their vehicle generally choose a hamper, little odd presents of game, fruit, perhaps wine, though it is essential to the delicacy of the latter that it be homemade. We love to have our friend in the country sitting thus at our table by proxy, to apprehend his presence, though 100 miles may be between us, by a turkey, whose goodly aspect reflects to us his plump corpusculum, to taste him in grouse or woodcock, to feel him gliding down in the toast peculiar to the latter, to concorporate him in a slice of Canterbury brawn. This is indeed to have him within ourselves, to know him intimately. Such participation is, methinks, unitive, as the old theologians phrase it. For these considerations we should be sorry if certain restrictive regulations, which are thought to bear hard upon the peasantry of this country, were entirely done away with. A hare, as the law now stands, makes many friends. Caius conciliates Titius, knowing his gout, with a leash of partridges. Titius, suspecting his partiality for them, passes them to Lucius, who in his turn, preferring his friend's relish to his own, makes them over to Marcius. till in their ever-widening progress and round of unconscious circummigration, they distribute the seeds of harmony over half a parish. We are well disposed to this kind of sensible remembrances, and are the less apt to be taken by those little airy tokens, impalpable to the palate, which, under the names of rings, lockets, keepsakes, amuse some people's fancy mightily. We could never away with these indigestible trifles. They are the very kickshaws and foppery of friendship. Homes there are, we are sure, that are no homes, the home of the very poor man, and another which we shall speak to presently. Crowded places of cheap entertainment, and the benches of ale-houses, if they could speak, might bear mournful testimony to the first. To them the very poor man resorts for an image of the home, which he cannot find at home, for a starved grate, and a scanty firing, that is not enough to keep alive the natural heat in the fingers of so many shivering children with their mother. He finds in the depth of winter always a blazing hearth, and a hob to warm his pittance of beer by. Instead of the clamours of a wife, made gaunt by famishing, he meets with a cheerful attendance beyond the merits of the trifle which he can afford to spend. He has companions which his home denies him, for the very poor man has no visitors. He can look into the goings-on of the world and speak a little to politics. At home there are no politics stirring, but the domestic. All interests, real or imaginary, all topics that should expand the mind of man, and connect him to a sympathy with general existence, are crushed in the absorbing consideration of food to be obtained for the family. Beyond the price of bread, news is senseless and impertinent. At home there is no larder. Here there is at least a show of plenty, and while he cooks his lean scrap of butcher's meat before the common bars, or munches his humbler cold viands, his relishing bread and cheese with an onion, in a corner where no one reflects upon his poverty, he has sight of the substantial joint providing for the landlord and his family. He takes an interest in the dressing of it, and while he assists in removing the trivet from the fire, he feels that there is such a thing as beef and cabbage, which he was beginning to forget at home. All this while he deserts his wife and children. But what wife and what children? Prosperous men who object to this desertion image to themselves some clean contented family like that which they go home to. But look at the countenance of the poor wives who follow and persecute their good man to the door of the public house, which he is about to enter, when something like shame would restrain him, if stronger misery did not induce him to pass the threshold. That face, ground by want, in which every cheerful, every conversible lineament has been long effaced by misery, is that a face to stay at home with? Is it more a woman or a wild cat? Alas, it is the face of the wife of his youth that once smiled upon him. It can smile no longer. What comforts can it share? What burthens can it lighten? Oh, 'tis a fine thing to talk of the humble meal shared together. But what if there be no bread in the cupboard? The innocent prattle of his children takes out the sting of a man's poverty. But the children of the very poor do not prattle. It is none of the least frightful features in that condition, that there is no childishness in its dwellings. Poor people, said a sensible old nurse to us once, do not bring up their children, they drag them up. The little careless darling of the wealthier nursery, in their hovel is transformed betimes into a premature reflecting person. No one has time to dandle it, no one thinks it worth while to coax it, to soothe it, to toss it up and down, to humour it. There is none to kiss away its tears. If it cries, it can only be beaten. It has been prettily said that a babe is fed with milk and praise, but the aliment of this poor babe was thin, unnourishing. The return to its little baby tricks and efforts to engage attention, bitter, ceaseless objurgation. It never had a toy or knew what a choral meant. It grew up without the lullaby of nurses. It was a stranger to the patient fondle, the hushing caress, the attracting novelty, the costlier plaything, or the cheaper offhand contrivance to divert the child. The prattled nonsense best sense to it, the wise impertinences, the wholesome lies, the apt story interposed, that puts a stop to present sufferings, and awakens the passion of young wonder. It was never sung to, no one ever told to it a tale of the nursery. It was dragged up to live or to die as it happened. It had no young dreams. It broke at once into the iron realities of life. A child exists not for the very poor as any object of dalliance. It is only another mouth to be fed, a pair of little hands to be betimes inured to labour. It is the rival, till it can be the co-operator, for food with the parent. It is never his mirth, his diversion, his solace. It never makes him young again, with recalling his young times. The children of the very poor have no young times. It makes the very heart to bleed to overhear the casual street talk between a poor woman and her little girl, a woman of the better sort of poor, in a condition rather above the squalid beings which we have been contemplating. It is not of toys, of nursery books, of summer holidays, fitting that age, of the promised sight or play, of praised sufficiency at school. It is of mangling and clear starching, of the price of coals or of potatoes. The questions of the child that should be the very outpourings of curiosity and idleness are marked with forecast and melancholy providence. It has come to be a woman before it was a child. It has learned to go to market. It chaffers, it haggles, it envies, it murmurs. It is knowing, acute, sharpened. It never prattles. Had we not reason to say that the home of the very poor is no home? There is yet another home, which we are constrained to deny to be one. It has a larder which the home of the poor man wants, its fireside conveniences of which the poor dream not. But with all this it is no home. It is the house of the man that is infested with many visitors. May we be branded for the veriest churl, if we deny our heart to the many noble-hearted friends that at times exchange their dwelling for our poor roof. It is not of guests that we complain, but of endless, purposeless visitants, droppers in as they are called. We sometimes wonder from what sky they fall. It is the very error of the position of our lodging. Its horoscopy was ill calculated, being just situate in a medium, a plaguy suburban mid-space, fitted to catch idlers from town or country. We are older than we were, and age is easily put out of its way. We have fewer sands in our glass to reckon upon, and we cannot brook to see them drop in endlessly succeeding impertinences. At our time of life, to be alone sometimes is as needful as sleep. It is the refreshing sleep of the day. The growing infirmities of age manifest themselves in nothing more strongly than in an inveterate dislike of interruption. The thing which we are doing, we wish to be permitted to do. We have neither much knowledge nor devices, but there are fewer in the place to which we hasten. We are not willingly put out of our way, even at a game of 9 pins. While youth was, we had vast reversions in time future. We are reduced to a present pittance, and obliged to economize in that article. We bleed away our moments now as hardly as our ducats. We cannot bear to have our thin wardrobe eaten and fretted into by moths. We are willing to barter our good time with a friend, who gives us in exchange his own. Herein is the distinction between the genuine guest and the visitant. This latter takes your good time, and gives you his bad in exchange. The guest is domestic to you as your good cat or household bird. The visitant is your fly that flaps in at your window and out again, leaving nothing but a sense of disturbance and victuals spoiled. The inferior functions of life begin to move heavily. We cannot concoct our food with interruptions. Our chief meal to be nutritive must be solitary. With difficulty we can eat before a guest, and never understood what the relish of public feasting meant. Meats have no sapper, nor digestion fair play in a crowd. The unexpected coming in of a visitant stops the machine. There is a punctual generation who time their calls to the precise commencement of your dining hour, not to eat, but to see you eat. Our knife and fork drop instinctively, and we feel that we have swallowed our latest morsel. Others again show their genius, as we have said, in knocking the moment you have just sat down to a book. They have a peculiar compassionating sneer, with which they hope that they do not interrupt your studies, though they flutter off the next moment, to carry their impertinences to the nearest student that they can call their friend. The tone of the book is spoiled. We shut the leaves, and with Dante's lovers, read no more that day. It were well if the effect of intrusion were simply coextensive with its presence, but it mars all the good hours afterwards. These scratches in appearance leave an orifice that closes not hastily. It is a prostitution of the bravery of friendship, says worthy Bishop Taylor, to spend it upon impertinent people, who are, it may be, loads to their families, but can never ease my loads. This is the secret of their gaddings, their visits and morning calls. They too have homes which are no homes. Good sir or madam, as it may be, we most willingly embrace the offer of your friendship. We long have known your excellent qualities. We have wished to have you nearer to us, to hold you within the very innermost fold of our heart. We can have no reserve towards a person of your open and noble nature. The frankness of your humor suits us exactly. We have been long looking for such a friend. Quick, let us disburthen our troubles into each other's bosom. Let us make our single joys shine by reduplication. But yap, yap, yap. What is this confounded cur? He has fastened his tooth, which is none of the bluntest, just in the fleshy part of my leg. It is my dog, sir. You must love him for my sake. Here, test, test, test. But he has bitten me. Ay, that he is apt to do till you are better acquainted with him. I have had him 3 years, he never bites me. Yap, 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 he is at it again. Oh, sir, you must not kick him. He does not like to be kicked. I expect my dog to be treated with all the respect due to myself. But do you always take him out with you when you go a friendship hunting? Invariably. 'Tis the sweetest, prettiest, best conditioned animal. I call him my test, the touchstone by which I try a friend. No one can properly be said to love me who does not love him. Excuse us, dear sir, or madam aforesaid, if upon further consideration we are obliged to decline the otherwise invaluable offer of your friendship, we do not like dogs. Mighty well, sir, you know the conditions, you may have worse offers, come along, test. The above dialogue is not so imaginary, but that, in the intercourse of life, we have had frequent occasions of breaking off an agreeable intimacy by reason of these canine appendages. They do not always come in the shape of dogs, they sometimes wear the more plausible and human character of kinsfolk, near acquaintances, my friend's friend, his partner, his wife, or his children. We could never yet form a friendship, not to speak of more delicate correspondences, however much to our taste, without the intervention of some third anomaly, some impertinent clog affixed to the relation, the understood dog in the proverb. The good things of life are not to be had singly, but come to us with a mixture, like a schoolboy's holiday with a task affixed to the tail of it. What a delightful companion is, if he did not always bring his tall cousin with him, he seems to grow with him, like some of those double births which we remember to have read of with such wonder and delight in the old Athenian oracle, where Swift commenced author by writing Pindaric odes. What a beginning for him! Upon Sir William Temple, there is the picture of the brother with the little brother peeping out at his shoulder, a species of fraternity which we have no name of kin close enough to comprehend. When comes, poking in his head and shoulders into your room, as if to feel his entry, you think, surely you have now got him to yourself. What a 3 hours' chat we shall have! But ever in the haunch of him, and before his diffident body is well disclosed in your apartment, appears the haunting shadow of the cousin, overpeering his modest kinsman, and sure to overlay the expected good talk with his insufferable prosody of stature, and uncorresponding dwarfishness of observation. Misfortunes seldom come alone. 'Tis hard when a blessing comes accompanied. Cannot we like Sempronia, without sitting down to chess with her eternal brother? Or know Sulpicia, without knowing all the round of her card-playing relations? Must my friends brethren of necessity be mine also? Must we be hand and glove with Dick Selby the parson, or Jack Selby the calico printer, because W.S., who is neither but a ripe wit and a critic, has the misfortune to claim a common parentage with them? Let him lay down his brothers, and 'tis odds but we will cast him in a pair of ours, we have a superflux to balance the concession. Let F.H. lay down his garrulous uncle, and Honorius dismiss his vapid wife, and superfluous establishment of 6 boys, things between boy and manhood, too ripe for play, too raw for conversation, that come in, impudently staring their father's old friend out of countenance, and will neither aid nor let alone the conference, that we may once more meet upon equal terms, as we were wont to do in the disengaged state of bachelorhood. It is well if your friend or mistress be content with these canicular probations. Few young ladies but in this sense keep a dog. But when Rutilia hounds at you her tiger aunt, or Ruspina expects you to cherish and fondle her viper sister, whom she has preposterously taken into her bosom, to try stinging conclusions upon your constancy, they must not complain if the house be rather thin of suitors. Scylla must have broken off many excellent matches in her time, if she insisted upon all that loved her, loving her dogs also. An excellent story to this moral is told of Mary, of Della Cruscan memory. In tender youth he loved and courted a modest appanage to the opera, in truth a dancer, who had won him by the artless contrast between her manners and situation. She seemed to him a native violet, that had been transplanted by some rude accident into that exotic and artificial hotbed. Nor in truth was she less genuine and sincere than she appeared to him. He wooed and won this flower, only for appearance sake, and for due honour to the bride's relations. She craved that she might have the attendance of her friends and kindred at the approaching solemnity. The request was too amiable not to be conceded, and in this solicitude for conciliating the good-will of mere relations, he found a presage of her superior attentions to himself, when the golden shaft should have killed the flock of all affections else. The morning came, and at the Star and Garter, Richmond, the place appointed for the breakfasting, accompanied with one English friend, he impatiently awaited what reinforcements the bride should bring to grace the ceremony. A rich muster she had made. They came in 6 coaches, the whole corps du ballet, French, Italian men and women. Monsieur de B, the famous pirouetter of the day, led his fair spouse but craggy from the banks of the Seine. The prima donna had sent her excuse, but the first and second buffer were there, and Signor S.C. and Signora C.H. and Madame V., with a countless cavalcade besides of chorusers, figurantes, at the sight of whom Mary afterwards declared that then for the first time it struck him seriously that he was about to marry a dancer. But there was no help for it. Besides, it was her day. These were, in fact, her friends and kinsfolk. The assemblage, though whimsical, was all very natural, but when the bride, handing out of the last coach a still more extraordinary figure than the rest, presented to him as her father, the gentleman that was to give her away, no less a person than Signor Delpini himself, with a sort of pride, as much as to say, "See what I have brought to do us honour." The thought of so extraordinary a paternity quite overcame him, and slipping away under some pretence from the bride and her motley adherents, poor Mary took horse from the backyard to the nearest sea-coast, from which, shipping himself to America, he shortly after consoled himself with a more congenial match in the person of Miss Brunton, relieved from his intended clown father and a bevy of painted buffers for bridemaids. At what precise minute that little airy musician doffs his night gear and prepares to tune up his unseasonable matins, we are not naturalists enough to determine, but for a mere human gentleman, that has no orchestra business to call him from his warm bed to such preposterous exercises, we take 10 or half after 10, 11 of course during this Christmas solstice, to be the very earliest hour at which he can begin to think of abandoning his pillow. To think of it, we say, for to do it in earnest requires another half-hour's good consideration. Not but there are pretty sun-risings, as we are told, and such like gods, abroad in the world, in summer-time especially, some hours before what we have assigned, which a gentleman may see, as they say, only for getting up. But having been tempted once or twice in earlier life to assist at those ceremonies, we confess our curiosity abated. We are no longer ambitious of being the sun's courtiers, to attend at his morning levees. We hold the good hours of the dawn too sacred to waste them upon such observances, which have in them, besides, something pagan and Persic. To say truth, we never anticipated our usual hour, or got up with the sun as 'tis cold, to go a journey, or upon a foolish whole day's pleasuring, but we suffered for it all the long hours after in listlessness and headaches. Nature herself sufficiently declaring her sense of our presumption, in aspiring to regulate our frail waking courses by the measures of that celestial and sleepless traveller. We deny not that there is something sprightly and vigorous, at the outset especially, in these break-of-day excursions. It is flattering to get the start of a lazy world, to conquer death by proxy in his image, but the seeds of sleep and mortality are in us, and we pay usually in strange qualms before night falls the penalty of the unnatural inversion. Therefore, while the busy part of mankind are fast huddling on their clothes, are already up and about their occupations, content to have swallowed their sleep by wholesale, we chose to linger abed and digest our dreams. It is the very time to recombine the wandering images, which night in a confused mass presented, to snatch them from forgetfulness, to shape and mould them. Some people have no good of their dreams. Like fast feeders, they gulp them too grossly to taste them curiously. We love to chew the cud of a foregone vision, to collect the scattered rays of a brighter phantasm, or act over again with firmer nerves the sadder nocturnal tragedies, to drag into daylight a struggling and half-vanishing nightmare, to handle and examine the terrors or the airy solaces. We have too much respect for these spiritual communications to let them go so lightly. We are not so stupid or so careless as that imperial forgetter of his dreams, that we should need a seer to remind us of the form of them. They seem to us to have as much significance as our waking concerns, or rather to import us more nearly, as more nearly we approach by years to the shadowy world whither we are hastening. We have shaken hands with the world's business, we have done with it, we have discharged ourselves of it. Why should we get up? We have neither suit to solicit nor affairs to manage. The drama has shut in upon us at the fourth act. We have nothing here to expect but in a short time a sick bed and a dismissal. We delight to anticipate death by such shadows as night affords. We are already half acquainted with ghosts. We were never much in the world. Disappointment early struck a dark veil between us and its dazzling illusions. Our spirits showed grey before our hairs. The mighty changes of the world already appear as but the vain stuff out of which dramas are composed. We have asked no more of life than what the mimic images in playhouses present us with. Even those types have waxed fainter. Our clock appears to have struck. We are superannuated. In this dearth of mundane satisfaction we contract politic alliances with shadows. It is good to have friends at court. The abstracted media of dreams seem no ill introduction to that spiritual presence, upon which in no long time we expect to be thrown. We are trying to know a little of the usages of that colony, to learn the language and the faces we shall meet with there, that we may be the less awkward at our first coming among them. We willingly call a phantom our fellow, as knowing we shall soon be of their dark companionship. Therefore we cherish dreams. We try to spell in them the alphabet of the invisible world, and think we know already how it shall be with us. Those uncouth shapes which, while we clung to flesh and blood, affrighted us, have become familiar. We feel attenuated into their meager essences, and have given the hand of halfway approach to incorporeal being. We once thought life to be something, but it has unaccountably fallen from us before its time. Therefore we choose to dally with visions. The sun has no purposes of ours to light us to. Why should we get up? We could never quite understand the philosophy of this arrangement, or the wisdom of our ancestors in sending us for instruction to these woolly bedfellows. A sheep, when it is dark, has nothing to do but to shut his silly eyes and sleep if he can. Man found out long sixes, hail candlelight, without disparagement to sun or moon, the kindliest luminary of the three, if we may not rather style thee their radiant deputy, mild viceroy of the moon. We love to read, talk, sit silent, eat, drink, sleep by candlelight. They are everybody's sun and moon. This is our peculiar and household planet. Wanting it, what savage unsocial nights must our ancestors have spent, wintering in caves and unillumined fastnesses. They must have lain about and grumbled at one another in the dark. What repartees could have passed when you must have felt about for a smile, and handled a neighbour's cheek to be sure that he understood it. This accounts for the seriousness of the elder poetry. It has a sombre cast, tri-Hesiod or Ossian, derived from the tradition of those unlanterned nights. Jokes came in with candles. We wonder how they saw to pick up a pin if they had any. How did they sup? What a mélange of chance carving they must have made of it. Here one had got a leg of a goat when he wanted a horse's shoulder. There another had dipped his scooped palm in a kid skin of wild honey when he meditated right mare's milk. There is neither good eating nor drinking in fresco. Who, even in these civilized times, has never experienced this, when at some economic table he has commenced dining after dusk, and waited for the flavour till the lights came? The senses absolutely give and take reciprocally. Can you tell pork from veal in the dark, or distinguish Sherris from pure Malaga? Take away the candle from the smoking man. By the glimmering of the left ashes he knows that he is still smoking, but he knows it only by an inference, till the restored light, coming in aid of the olfactories, reveals to both senses the full aroma. Then how he redoubles his puffs, how he burnishes. There is absolutely no such thing as reading but by a candle. We have tried the affectation of a book at noonday in gardens and in sultry arbours, but it was labour thrown away. Those gay motes in the beam come about you, hovering and teasing like so many coquettes that will have you all to their self, and are jealous of your abstractions. By the midnight taper the writer digests his meditations. By the same light we must approach to their perusal if we would catch the flame, the odour. It is a mockery, all that is reported of the influential Phoebus. No true poem ever owed its birth to the sun's light. They are abstracted works. Things that were born when none but the still night, and his dumb candle, saw his pinching throes. Merry daylight might furnish the images, the crude material, but for the fine shapings, the true turning and filing, as mine author hath it, they must be content to hold their inspiration of the candle. The mild internal light that reveals them, like fires on the domestic hearth, goes out in the sunshine. Night and silence call out the starry fancies. Milton's morning hymn on paradise, we would hold a good wager, was penned at midnight. And Taylor's richer description of a sunrise smells decidedly of the taper. Even ourself, in these our humbler lucubrations, tune our best measured cadences. Prose has her cadences, not unfrequently to the charm of the drowsier watchman, blessing the doors, or the wild sweep of winds at midnight. Even now a loftier speculation than we have yet attempted courts our endeavours. We would indite something about the solar system. Betty, bring the candles. We grant that it is, and a very serious one, to a man's friends, and to all that have to do with him. But whether the condition of the man himself is so much to be deplored, may admit of a question. We can speak a little to it, being ourself but lately recovered. We whisper it in confidence, reader, out of a long and desperate fit of the sullens. Was the cure a blessing? The conviction which wrought it came too clearly to leave a scruple of the fanciful injuries, for they were mere fancies which had provoked the humour, but the humour itself was too self-pleasing. While it lasted, we know how bare we lay ourself in the confession, to be abandoned all at once with the grounds of it. We still brood over wrongs which we know to have been imaginary, and for our old acquaintance N, whom we find to have been a truer friend than we took him for, we substitute some phantom, a Caius or a Titius, as like him as we dare to form it, to wreak our yet unsatisfied resentments on. It is mortifying to fall at once from the pinnacle of neglect, to forego the idea of having been ill-used and contumaciously treated by an old friend. The first thing to aggrandize a man in his own conceit is to conceive of himself as neglected. There let him fix if he can. To undeceive him is to deprive him of the most tickling morsel within the range of self-complacency. No flattery can come near it. Happy is he who suspects his friend of an injustice, but supremely blessed, who thinks all his friends in a conspiracy to depress and undervalue him. There is a pleasure, we sing not to the profane, far beyond the reach of all that the world counts joy, a deep, enduring satisfaction in the depths, where the superficial seek it not of discontent. Were we to recite one half of this mystery, which we were let into by our late dissatisfaction, all the world would be in love with disrespect. We should wear a slight for a bracelet, and neglects and contumacies would be the only matter for courtship. Unlike to that mysterious book in the Apocalypse, the study of this mystery is unpalatable only in the commencement. The first sting of a suspicion is grievous, but wait, out of that wound, which to flesh and blood seemed so difficult, there is balm and honey to be extracted. Your friend passed you on such or such a day, having in his company one that you conceived worse than ambiguously disposed towards you, passed you in the street without notice. To be sure he is something short-sighted, and it was in your power to have accosted him, but facts and sane inferences are trifles to a true adept in the science of dissatisfaction. He must have seen you, and who was with him must have been the cause of the contempt. It galls you, and well it may, but have patience. Go home and make the worst of it, and you are a made man from this time. Shut yourself up, and, rejecting as an enemy to your peace every whispering suggestion that but insinuates there may be a mistake, reflect seriously upon the many lesser instances which you had begun to perceive, in proof of your friend's disaffection towards you. None of them singly was much to the purpose, but the aggregate weight is positive, and you have this last affront to clench them. Thus far the process is anything but agreeable. But now to your relief comes in the comparative faculty. You conjure up all the kind feelings you have had for your friend, what you have been to him and what you would have been to him if he would have suffered you, how you defended him in this or that place, and his good name, his literary reputation and so forth was always dearer to you than your own. Your heart, spite of itself, yearns towards him. You could weep tears of blood but for a restraining pride. How say you? Do you not yet begin to apprehend a comfort, some allay of sweetness in the bitter waters? Stop not here, nor penuriously cheat yourself of your reversions. You are on vantage ground. Enlarge your speculations and take in the rest of your friends, as a spark kindles more sparks. Was there one among them, who has not to you proved hollow, false, slippery as water? Begin to think that the relation itself is inconsistent with mortality, that the very idea of friendship with its component parts as honor, fidelity, steadiness exists but in your single bosom. Image yourself to yourself as the only possible friend in a world incapable of that communion. Now the gloom thickens, the little star of self-love twinkles, that is to encourage you through deeper glooms than this. You are not yet at the half-point of your elevation, you are not yet, believe me, half sulky enough, adverting to the world in general, as these circles in the mind will spread to infinity. Reflect with what strange injustice you have been treated in quarters where, setting gratitude and the expectation of friendly returns aside as chimeras, you pretended no claim beyond justice, the naked due of all men. Think the very idea of right and fit fled from the earth, or your breast the solitary receptacle of it, till you have swelled yourself into at least one hemisphere, the other being the vast Arabia Stony of your friends and the world aforesaid, to grow bigger every moment in your own conceit, and the world to lessen, to deify yourself at the expense of your species, to judge the world. This is the acme and supreme point of your mystery, these the true pleasures of sulkiness. We profess no more of this grand secret than what ourself experimented on one rainy afternoon in the last week, sulking in our study. We had proceeded to the penultimate point, at which the true adept seldom stops, where the consideration of benefit forgot is about to merge in the meditation of general injustice, when a knock at the door was followed by the entrance of the very friend, whose not seeing of us in the morning, for we will now confess the case our own, an accidental oversight, had given rise to so much agreeable generalization. To mortify us still more, and take down the whole flattering superstructure which pride had piled upon neglect, he had brought in his hand the identical in whose favour we had suspected him of the contumacy. Asseverations were needless, where the frank manner of them both was convictive of the injurious nature of the suspicion. We fancied that they perceived our embarrassment, but were too proud, or something else, to confess to the secret of it. We had been but too lately in the condition of the noble patient in Argus. Qui credibat miros audia tragodos, in vacuo eltus cessor plossoc theatro, and could have exclaimed with equal reason against the friendly hands that cured us. Palmi oxidistes amici non servastes 8, cui sic extorta voluptas, et demptus per vim mentis gratissimus error.